Number 4. Late one cold night, I found myself engrossed in a book in my first-floor bedroom. Nestled in a quiet, wooded area, and living alone, I never bothered with window blinds. The seclusion offered by the surroundings seemed enough. Plus, waking up to sunlight filtering through my windows was always a joy. However, this particular night would make me reconsider my decision to forego blinds. As I finally switched off my reading lamp, settling in for sleep, I was met with a brief moment of silence before a distinct sound shattered the tranquility, a single tap against the window, as if from a person's fist. Though I hesitated to turn around, I couldn't dismiss it as merely a tree branch brushing against the glass. The thought of someone looking outside, peering into my private space, sent shivers down my spine. Trying to rationalize, I convinced myself it might be nothing more than a mischievous prankster. Ignoring it seemed the best course of action, hoping they'd grow bored and leave. But as another knock echoed through the room, my resolve wavered. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Summoning what courage I had left, I decided to confront the intruder. Yet, as I turned toward the window, a fleeting glimpse of a dark figure dotting away dashed any bravery I mustered. Racing to the kitchen phone, I dialed the police, praying for a swift response. In the eerie silence that followed, I caught a figure outside my kitchen window, staring back at me before vanishing into the night. The realization that someone had been watching me sent chills down my spine. A call from my vigilant neighbor, also my closest friend, revealed even more unsettling details. 3 individuals clad in black had trespassed onto my property, one brandishing a menacing object. Panic surged through me as I retreated upstairs, seeking refuge in the bathroom. As the relentless knocking on my front door persisted, I prayed for the police's timely arrival. Moments later, their authoritative voices shattered the tension, but the intruders had already fled into the woods, evading capture. In the aftermath, I wasted no time in installing blinds, determined never to feel so exposed and vulnerable again. Number 3. I moved into a house that my aunt and uncle had been renting out for several years after they built a new place. I spent a few months alone before a buddy from work asked if I was looking for a roommate. I thought about it for a few days and ended up allowing him to move in. It was a 2-bedroom place with a den and office in the garage. He decided he wanted his own space as the bedrooms were right next to each other, so he moved his stuff into the office in the garage. I have to admit it was a pretty cool setup. The only problem, he didn't have a bathroom or a kitchen out there, so he would use the kitchen and toilet in the house. We worked different schedules, so I would often leave the house unlocked for him. One night, I went to my girlfriend's house for dinner. After I got back, I decided to grab a 6-pack of beer I'd bought the previous night. When I opened the fridge, my beer was gone. I assumed it was my roommate and went into a blind rage. I stormed out into the garage and slammed his bedroom door open. He was sleeping and rolled over. I screamed at him, asking why he drank my beer without asking. He said he didn't touch my beer and rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. Having lived with him for a while, I was pretty good at judging when he was lying. I felt he was telling the truth. My heart sank as I came to the realization that somebody had stolen our beer from the fridge and whatever else. We went back into the house and made sure everything was in its place. The TV was there, all the furniture. It wasn't until I went into my bedroom and realized my $2,000 laptop was gone that we began to panic. My buddy called the cops, and we searched high and low for the beer and laptop, thinking I might have misplaced them. We soon gave up and began to search the yard for whoever had done this. We didn't live alone in this house, though. There was a room that had been built on several years after the house was built. My aunt's dying mother spent her last couple of years living there, as it was easy for my aunt and uncle to care for her during her sickness. When she died, they began to rent the room out to a strange woman, before eventually moving out themselves and renting the rest of the house out. The woman remained there until we moved in, and my aunt and uncle had their concerns with her. They believed she was a drug addict, which became evident to us during our stay there. She behaved erratically, and we would hear strange noises from her end of the house all hours of the night. Her brother moved in several months after we did, which was strange because her place was a one-bedroom suite. We figured he just slept on the couch or something. He was even weirder than her, though. He wouldn't acknowledge me when I pulled up into the driveway while he was sitting having a smoke. Trying to make conversation with the guy was pointless. He basically just stared through your soul. One night, he even asked my roommate if he could score him drugs. That night, during our search for the burglar, we went out to the garage door, only to find bare footprints in the snow. The footprints led from their suite door to our garage door. We put 2 and 2 together and began banging on their door. We said we knew it was him and he better answer the door. Someone inside lifted the curtain and made eye contact with me, which to this day still gives me chills. The cops showed up and sucked down all our information. They searched the house and found nothing and no one. He showed them the footprints and explained that the people living this week were drug addicts. We gave the officers their names. They ran the names in their cruiser and came back to inform us that the man had a warrant in another province and was convicted of breaking and entering several years back. The cops knocked on their door for several minutes and identified themselves as police officers to no avail. They informed us that because the warrant was from out of province and technically the man hadn't committed a crime there was nothing they could do about it. The cops left and it was 1 a.m. So, my roommate and I went to bed. The door that connects the 2 weirdos' suite and my part of the house can only be locked from their side of the door. I completely forgot about this before falling asleep. During the night, I heard footsteps outside my door, a few loud bangs, and my doorknob began to shake violently. I was barely awake and brushed it off as my roommate. Luckily, I always lock my bedroom door at night. The next morning, I asked my roommate what was so important at 3 a.m. that he would need to try and get in my room. He told me he slept through the night and hadn't even got up to go to the bathroom. My heart sank. I told him what had happened during the night. I have never been more glad that I lock my door at night due to some silly childhood fear that I've held on to into adulthood. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if I left my bedroom door open and that man got into my room. Needless to say, me and my buddy moved out of that place a few weeks later. Number 2. This incident occurred approximately 7 years ago. Interestingly, it was on Halloween night, quite late, nearing midnight, when all the neighborhood kids had already gone home. Even the neighbors across the street had ceased playing their cliched Halloween tape. You know, the one with the creaking door sounds and witch cackling. It was just my cousin Q and me in the living room. Another cousin, who was about 4 years old, had left her doll lying on the floor face down. It was one of those Baby Alive dolls or something similar, the type with moving eyelids. Q had always been uncomfortable with the doll since it was purchased. She found it creepy and often tossed it down the basement stairs. Personally, I had no qualms about it, so I left it on the floor for my little cousin to pick up in the morning. For about half an hour, there was complete silence until I heard a loud rasping shuffling noise, seemingly coming from outside. It sounded like an older man just outside our window. I turned to Q, who glanced back at me. "Did you hear that?" "It's probably the neighbor's tape again," she remarked, returning to her computer. Another minute passed before we heard the rasping noise again, louder this time. It seemed like the man was attempting to say something. I stood up from the couch and peeked out the window. There was nobody there, not even in the street. Our neighbor's house was dark. The night was as serene as any in our quiet neighborhood. "There's no one out there," I informed Q, turning back to her. She remained silent. I was starting to feel uneasy. Another minute elapsed, and this time there was whispering, but it was loud whispering. It sounded like a child and a woman. Finally, Q looked up from her computer. "It's that doll," she stated. Naturally, she believed so. She was quite superstitious. I gave her a skeptical look. Let me make this clear. I don't believe in the paranormal. I went down and picked up the doll. It seemed normal, with its eyes closed. I forgot to mention it had a voice box, but it was without batteries. I placed it back down. "No, it's not. Just leave it alone," I advised her. Silence ensued once more as I returned to my seat on the couch. The rasping resumed, and I heard the man utter something gobbled, followed by wheezing. I leaped up from the couch, intending to check if the noise was coming from the backyard. Just as I began walking, I noticed the doll had shifted slightly. I picked it up again and turned it over. Its eyes were open, and it felt heavier than before. I dropped it, and Q threw it down the basement stairs once again. I'm still unsure what to make of it. Q denies it ever happened, and my little cousin never inquired about her doll after that incident. I saw the doll only once more after that, on the top basement step, lying on its side. This time, I pushed it down the stairs. Number 1. My parents are divorced, and I was living with my dad. I'm an only child, so the only time I was around kids my own age was when I was out making friends with kids on the block. There was this one kid that lived on the corner of my block. His name was Tom. I met him while riding my bike. He strangely invited me over to shoot some hoops with him, so I did. He was a lot older than me. I was 12, and he was 16. I found out after hanging out with him a lot that he was an only child as well, and that he also lived with his dad. At first, I found him very relatable. I gave him my phone number, and he would call to hang out sometimes. He would come over and play video games, but then he started getting weird. He would call non-stop. If I didn't answer, he would begin to leave annoyed messages. He would call 5 or 6 times before coming over and ringing the bell. If my dad wasn't home, I usually didn't answer it. But when he was home, he would force me to hang out with Tom, even though I told him he was creepy. I biked with Tom back down to his house while pretending to listen to him babble on about stupid things. This kid would never shut up. I needed to find a way to get him to stop looking for me. Then, for the first time, he invited me into his house. I really didn't want to go in, but it didn't seem I had a choice. The second I walked into the door, the foul, disgusting odor of his house filled my lungs. Clothes were tossed all over the floor, broken glass in one corner of the room, and what looked like coffee stains on the wall. It was the most disgusting place I'd ever seen. And then, a huge, shady-looking man walked out from another room. He looked at me with a very intimidating look. I felt myself backing up away from him until Tom introduced him as his father. The man just gave me a big grunt and stomped off into another room. It was official. This kid was a creep. I needed to get away from him for good. I decided I didn't even want to be in that house anymore and just made up some excuse to go. I think that I said that I forgot I had a doctor's appointment, and at that moment, his smile slowly faded as an unhappy, if not extremely angry, expression crossed his face. He didn't even give me any response. He just looked at me with this unnerving stare. I left in a hurry and ran back down the block to my house. The door was locked, surprisingly. I unlocked it with the key my dad made me carry and found that he wasn't home. I really wanted him to be home. And then, I found a little sticky note on the fridge saying he was called into work for a possible storm emergency. So that night, before going to sleep, I checked my email for a response from somebody on eBay. But instead, I had about 5 new emails, all titled in capital letters, and they were all sent from an email named tomtom20@aol.com. It was him. I never gave him my email and still have no idea how he got it. One of the emails was titled "You made a mistake." Another was titled "I know where you live." And the rest were filled with profanity and threats. I was only 12 and was extremely intimidated by this, so I was ready to call my dad. But as soon as I was heading to the kitchen phone, I heard the sound of rustling bushes outside. I opened the blinds of the window that I was facing the bushes and was greeted by the face of a huge man who I instantly recognized as Tom's dad. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was already gone. When my dad came home early because of this situation, he went on to get a restraining order as soon as possible. Tom and his dad moved out about a month after that.